On today's show, we've got a full game day preview. The Ottawa Senators wrapping up their 9-game road trip in Detroit against the rival Red Wings.
And more call-ups coming from Belleville as Ottawa Senators players are now getting injured at practice.
This is Brady Tkachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get started with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. Today is Tuesday, January 7th, and Pilsy. The Ottawa Senators went home for some rest and relaxation, but at the end of the day, they have their practice from hell, and now JBD could be out long term.
I can't believe it, Ross. This team is cursed right now. Like, the injuries are just piling up. We talked about it, and you posted on Twitter at Sens Central. 6 players called up from the Belleville Senators. Not only forwards, not only defensemen, but a goalie as well. Like, just all over the board, this team is down bad, and they're hurt everywhere. And just when you think, okay, at least, like we talked about it yesterday, Ross, Travis Hamonic comes out, but Artem Zub's healthy, so that's okay. But then JBD goes down with a horrific leg injury. Apparently on a drill, he slipped and fell into the boards, and you could tell from the look on his face, the way teammates were having to help him off the ice, the vibe around the guys on the ice, and he couldn't put any weight on his left leg. That's not going to be a minor injury. Brandon Piller, not a doctor, but that looks like something that's going to be quite a while for the young defenseman.
We hope Jacob Bernard Docker is all right. The Senators also recalling Maxence Guenette from the Belleville Sens, which makes me nervous about the status of Nick Jensen, who was battling the flu. He went back to practice, and another TSN 1200 tweet yesterday said that Nick Jensen was laboring after one drill. So we'll see if it's just an extra to have on the road because the flu has been going through the locker room. The Senators also have an extra forward up. So despite 6 call-ups, 2 could be healthy scratches. We know Levi Marilainen's up. Now Guenette and Nicholas Matin-Palo on the back end. We're still calling Zach Ostapchuk a call-up because he started the year in Belleville, although he's been a real consistent piece in the fourth line. Since then, Jan Yannick and Cole Reinhardt all up from Belleville. But there is a game tonight, Pilsy. 7 o'clock puck drop in Detroit, and we'll see how the Senators use the day because there will not be a morning skate. So the Senators will not be announcing their lineup or their starting goalie until the start of warm-up. So stay tuned for that, buddy.
I think that's actually the right play, Ross. Usually you and I are itching to find out the times that the team hits the ice. The Red Wings just got off the ice, so we have brand new lines from them and a starting goalie from them as well. But when you have a practice like you did yesterday where a guy gets seriously hurt, Jensen didn't make it through unscathed, and you've got the flu going around, maybe just skip out on the morning skate. I don't hate that play there.
No, I don't. So let's talk about the lines that we saw at practice yesterday, because there is one interesting note here. The top line, it's been their most consistent line, if you can even call anything that. The last 2 games have been brutal overall, but the only line to score for them in those 2 games was a pair of goals against Dallas from the top line of Shane Pinto, Brady Tkachuk, and Ridley Gregg. Then you have Tim Stützle with Claude Giroux moved back up onto that line with Drake Batherson, leaving Josh Norris centering Nick Cousins and Adam Gaudette. The fourth line is Zach Ostapchuk with Cole Reinhardt and Noah Gregor. On the back end, look, we're trying to will this into existence. Thomas Chabot with Nick Jensen. We hope that stays the same and that Jensen's good to go tonight. You got Jake Sanderson with Artem Zub, and then Tyler Klevin with Nicholas Matin-Palo. We also do not know the starting goalie. We've moved Marilainen into where we put our starter because we're hoping that the 22-year-old gets the net tonight. But again, we will not find out until warm-up. That leaves Jan Yannick and Max Guenette as the extras. And Pilsy, before we get to our locked-on player to watch, what do you think about the move having Giroux up in the top 6 and leaving Norris on a real third line now. Before we were saying it's like a top 9, you spread out Giroux and you have pairs basically through the top 9, but this is a more traditional top 6, bottom 6.
I think the one thing that I'm going to key in on here, Ross, is the fact that Tim Stützle has really slowed down his offensive production recently. And you got to give him a little bit of a leash. It was very clear that he had the flu for a couple games, so that'll happen. But even before that, he hadn't been performing. And Giroux was on that third line like you talked about. But I think Travis Green probably looked at this and was like, all right, Tim Stützle is our number 1 top point producer. When he's not producing points, it's very difficult for this team to get wins. We've seen it in the last couple of games. They haven't been able to have success. Tim Stützle not successful. So let's give him some support. Let's put Giroux and Batherson on that line. Giroux will take the draws. We know he snaps back at a very high rate of success. And then Batherson, this has been a guy that's he's been very consistent throughout the year. And I think pairs really well with Tim Stützle, both dual threats that can shoot or pass at any given moment. So I think that's a good line. Where I do get worried, though, Ross, is this third line now. Josh Norris, in my opinion, is not a guy that can drive a line, and I want to see him as a finisher in a line. And when you have Adam Gaudette on that line, let's be honest, Gaudette really isn't that great at doing anything but shooting the puck and scoring goals. And when he's not doing that, he's not doing a whole heck of a lot. And you could say the same about Josh Norris. So Nick Cousins is going to have to be feeding these guys. And no offense to Nick Cousins, because he's actually been a bright spot here, but he's not exactly the playmaking type that can get these two guys going. So I'm worried that the cost of boosting Tim Stützle will lead to the bottom 6 becoming pretty much completely ineffective offensively.
If there's a team, though, that you're going to do this against, Josh Norris sees red against the Wings, his home state, the Michigan man. 7 goals, 10 points in 9 career games against the Wings, including both goals in a 2-1 win earlier this season when the two teams went head-to-head in Ottawa. My locked-on player, though, it has to be Tim Stützle tonight. No shots on goal in 3 straight games. 0. Cannot happen.
That's crazy. I mean, he doesn't like shooting the puck on the best of days, but you got to mix in a shot on goal a game. Especially
when you've been on a bit of a slump. No even strength goals in his last 5, just the 1 point, the power play goal in Winnipeg. That's it. That's it, Pilsy. They need their superstar to be just that. Against the Wings, 14 points in 11 career games. So he has had success like most players have on Ottawa because they have dominated the Wings, 13 wins in their last 16 games against the Detroit Red Wings. But I'm going to be very locked on to Tim Stützle. I don't know if he cares or knows this, but with 8 points in Lucas Raymond's last 5 games, he's actually jumped Tim Stützle by 1 point and now leads all under 23 players in the league in point scoring, albeit with an extra game played. But that said, Tim Stützle is my locked on player. If the Senators want to win tonight, they need Tim Stützle to be a difference maker.
Yep, I agree with that, Ross. Great one there. Timmy Superstar, Tinted Timmy. Let's go. I already mentioned it with the Locked On Red Wings guys, so I'm going to stick to mine, Ross. My locked on player is going to be number 9, Josh Norris. You talked about how he's very successful up against the Detroit Red Wings. His 7 career goals in 9 games is the most goals he's scored up against any opponent in the league, Ross. Now, obviously, his games played up against opponents is skewed based on the Canadian division in the COVID season, as all the Canadian teams are his most games played. But in only 9 games, 7 goals. So let's hope he can get that going, Ross. And like I mentioned, I need to see if Josh Norris can drive a line. I don't think he can, but if the bottom 6 is going to have any success offensively, it has to come from Josh Norris. So I'm going to be locked on to number 9, the Michigan man tonight.
It's going to be an interesting game tonight for the Ottawa Senators, ending their 9-game road trip that's seen them play 8 straight games against Western Conference teams. Now, they play 12 games over their next 20 days. Like, this is an enormously busy stretch. So I hope they did get some rest and recovery in there, Pilsy, because they're not going to get a whole lot over the coming days. And also 11 of their next 13 games are against Eastern Conference opponents. lots within the division as well. So you're going to need to stack up some points if you want to maintain your spot around a playoff spot. Now, we'll get to the wild card, appropriately named, with what's been going on around the league a little bit later on in the show. But that is how your Ottawa Senators are expected to line up in today's game. And look, I doubt it. But wouldn't it be nice if somehow, some way, we could see a Michael Amadio or a David Perron in the lineup? But with the call-ups, I highly doubt that's going to happen. Maybe Thursday against Buffalo at home, and then they've got a back-to-back on the weekend at Pittsburgh on Saturday and at home to Dallas on Sunday.
But Ross, speaking of the call-ups, like, we don't know what the lines are going to be, and we have Jan Unique as an extra, but we've been talking about this, Ross. Get him in the lineup for tonight's game. Like, we know that animosity that he had up against the Red Wings in the preseason.
He was waving at their bench on his way off.
And we talked with the Locked On Red Wings guys, Scotty and Brian, and they were saying every time the Ottawa Senators come to Detroit, they just bully the Red Wings. So you're out a lot of players here. You're really, like, this is not an ideal situation for the Sens on the road. So basically, I'll transition this to a key to victory, Ross. If you're going to win this game, you got to bully a small, skilled Detroit Red Wings team that doesn't, like, other than what, Rasmussen and Edvinsson, and I mean, Moritz Seider can be a mean player as well, and he's got some size, but, like, other than those guys, like, you have a real opportunity to push your weight around and dominate the game physically. So, in my opinion, and not that Jan Unique is like the biggest tough guy, but if he can get under their skin and bully them around a bit and get them off their game, that's the kind of strategy you need to get here. So my key to victory is try to bully your way into the Detroit Red Wings head and get them off their game.
We'll have another key to victory on the other side. We'll take a look at these brand new Detroit Red Wings lines. They just got off the ice at the morning skate. And what's next when we look at the Eastern Conference? That is next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, and now we know the schedule, so get ready. And new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Ross, I know we're talking about the NFL here, but on Locked On Senators, we got to check out the lines for the Sens Red Wings game on FanDuel. The Sens are favorited at -118. The over-under is set at 5.5. So this is a big game for the Ottawa Senators, and if you want to get in on the action more, do it with America's #1 sportsbook at FanDuel.com. Make this NFL playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub, our pub in the heart of the Glebe. You can visit them at 779 Bank Street, and on a Sens game day like today, go there and watch the game and get 10% off your order by letting them know that you are a Sens Central citizen. You can also take their Sens Shuttle. Can you believe it? Home games coming up for the Ottawa Senators, including Thursday against the Buffalo Sabres. You can get your tickets on the GLEBE Central Pub website. Just head there and click events and the Senators bus. Make sure to check off that Locked On Senators sent you. They've got the shuttle for the Thursday game against Buffalo, and then next Thursday against Washington, Saturday afternoon against the Boston Bruins, and oh boy, January 25th, Sens Leafs. Get it all for $17 round trip to and from the CTC. You can get on the bus an hour and 15 minutes before the game, and they'll pick you up right where they drop you off. Easy to get to, and you beat the traffic. All thanks to our friends at the GLEBE Central Pub. So head to where the vibes are free. That's the GCP at 779 Bank Street, and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. All right, Philsy. So the Ottawa Senators come into tonight's game still in a good spot. We've got games in hand, but it is looking a lot more nefarious at the top of the wild card race and even into the third seed in the Atlantic Division, where the Boston Bruins are sitting at 45 points, but Ottawa's got 4 games in hand on the Bruins, and they're 5 points back. So win your games in hand, and all will be well. The Senators are 9-11-1 on the road this season. They're going to have to do some home cooking afterwards, but no way this team can look ahead from tonight. 7 o'clock puck drop. And of course, we will have the postcast for you live on YouTube at the Locked On Senators channel right after this one finishes. You had your key to victory. Mine, Pilsy, is going to be the power play. I think for Ottawa to have success, and look, obviously you need saves, and that's something that is going to be a big factor in this game. But the power play for me, when you look, Detroit's penalty kill is better than they were, but they're still 31st in the National Hockey League. So bully the Red Wings and try to make them take undisciplined penalties and then make them pay when that happens. Ottawa's PK, still not perfect either. But if you think Ottawa's PK has been bad, they're sitting around 20th in the league right now. So it's a penalty kill that allows power play goals more than 30% of the time. They're sitting at 69% on the year. So that's going to be a big key to victory for me, is getting power plays, one, which I don't know how many power plays they have against Dallas and Dallas, they had at least a couple, but they haven't really drawn a whole lot. They had 1 against the St. Louis Blues, 2 against Minnesota, albeit 4 against Dallas. So you want to at least get 3 or 4 opportunities tonight, and we'll see how things develop where the Ottawa Senators can make some hay on the power play.
Yep, that's a good one, Ross. I wanted to mention that as well. So nice job there. And I think, Ross, this is a game where you're going to have to try to outscore some of your problems. We want it to be Levi Merilainen starting in goal, but both of us have this weird feeling that they're going to go with the veteran Anton Forsberg. And I wish I could say I had confidence in Forsey that he can get back to the Forsberg that got him that 3-year deal. But even positive Pilsy, Ross, I can't reach down and spin zone it. I just have no faith that Anton Forsberg can steal a win for this team. So if he is, in fact, starting, you got to find a way to outscore your problems in goal, and the best way to do that is on the man advantage.
The Ottawa Senators may be tipping their hat to Anton Forsberg's 3-0 career record against the Detroit Red Wings, where he has a .951 save percentage. Now, that's the good, and obviously it's over the course of years, whereas this season, in Anton Forsberg's last 6 games, he's 1-5 with an .858 save percentage. That's just frankly not going to cut it. Who will the Senators goalies be facing tonight? Well, let's take a look at the lineup for the Detroit Red Wings. Their top line is Dylan Larkin with Joe Veleno and Lucas Raymond. Their second line is Andrew Kopp between Alex DeBrincat and Patrick Kane. Third line, JT Compher with Jonathan Berggren and Vladimir Tarasenko. And the fourth line, Marco Kasper with Michael Rasmussen and Tyler Mott. On the back end, Ben Sherratt with Moritz Seider, Simon Edvinsson with Albert Johansson, and Eric Gustafsson with Justin Hall. Alex Lyon will get the start in goal. Pilsy, your lookout player to watch for this team that's won 4 games in a row and are 4-1 under new coach Todd McClellan.
Oh boy. I'm going to be looking out for number 88, Ross, Patrick Kane. I know he is not the Patrick Kane of the glory years in Chicago, but this is still a guy, if he gets time and space, he is so dangerous, and he has feasted on the Ottawa Senators, Ross. In 23 career games against the Sens, he has 34 points. I mean, almost an assist per game, 21 assists and 23 points. So he's so dangerous, and I feel like people kind of like look at his hip and how much he's slowed down, and they don't really take him as seriously anymore. If he has time and space, he will make you look ridiculous, especially up against not top caliber goaltending. So I'm looking out for number 88, Patrick Kane.
Yeah, he's also figured it out a little bit more since the coaching change, and even a little bit before that, but he really struggled offensively to start the year. Patrick Kane, 4-game win streak. Patrick Kane's on a 4-game point streak, has 7 points in his last 4 games. He's also just dummied the Ottawa Senators through his entire career, despite being out west. 34 points in 23 career games against the Sens. for me, I'm going to go on the same line with Alex DeBrincat. He scored the lone goal for the Red Wings in the game in Ottawa earlier this year. He won't have to deal with the Boo Birds tonight being a home game for Detroit. But when he goes, the team goes. We saw that when Ottawa had him. Whenever he produced, the team produced. And if you can shut him down and get him frustrated and have him hitting the post and fanning on one-timers, then you have him right where you want him. So the Cat is a beneficiary from Patrick Kane, because as Kane goes playmaking wise, Alex DeBrincat can be that guy that can pull trigger, whereas Andrew Kopp to me is just kind of like a get in front of the net, kind of grind down low type player on that line. I don't know if he'd be my choice to play with those two. I'd probably have Marco Kasper there, but I ain't Todd McClellan and I ain't coaching the Detroit Red Wings. So this is how it shapes out, and those two wingers are going to have a lot to say with the outcome of tonight's game. We mentioned that the Wings have been very good since the new coach came in. They lost their first game, but since he really kind of set his parameters and did what he wants to do as a style, they've been a lot better. So we'll be watching for that. And especially with so much former Sens, hashtag Sens abroad out there, DeBrincat, Tarasenko, and Tyler Mott, not to mention the backup goalie tonight, Cam Talbot. Our boys over at Locked On Red Wings told us Austin Watson is leading the Grand Rapids Griffins AHL team in scoring. So there's a lot of former Sens flavor in the Red Wings organization this season. And we'll
Stevie Yzerman, Ottawa boy,
for sure. And Todd McClellan, we did a full episode on whether or not he should have been hired as the Ottawa Senators coach this past offseason. So tonight's going to be a big test for the Ottawa Senators. And I mean, we used the flu excuse on back-to-back games Thursday and Friday. Like, Pillsy, I think that's done. Like, we can't be giving them a week off because they have the flu in the middle of a playoff race. I think it's important for them to battle through it tonight. 60 minutes of hockey. You haven't played a game since Friday, so you've had all weekend and Monday to travel. It's a show me game tonight. Like, I know a lot of people, ourselves included, have thrown around must win. I think with all the injuries, you hope that they can get their top guys, because it's not like Stützle and Sanderson are out of the lineup. I mean, no offense, but a lot of these guys are depth players. Does it matter? For sure.
Allmark.
Yeah, and Allmark.
Sorry.
But you need Tim Stützle, Drake Batherson, Josh Norris, Brady Tkachuk, and Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot for that matter. Your 6 core pieces who are locked up long-term. And the only reason why you can even argue that Ottawa's rebuild is ahead of Detroit's is those players being already established NHLers. That's the crew to me that beyond getting saves, those 6 guys need to win this game for the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, I agree. Now, look, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I just had the flu, and that took me out for 5 straight days to recover, and I wasn't playing NHL hockey and traveling, so I'll still give a little bit of leeway there. But like, at what point do you keep pointing to that as the excuse, right? And this, I'm fully on board, Ross. Usually I tiptoe around it where you like to take full charge in it, but I'm fully on board. This is a must-win game. Just with how tight the standings are, it pains me to see the Montreal Canadiens in that wild card spot now instead of the Ottawa Senators. I need to get back there and leapfrog the Habs. So for me, this is a must-win game. You gotta, successful teams, Ross, find different ways to win games when they're not set up in ideal scenarios. This is the perfect example of this. I mentioned this, I think, last week, Ross. I said this is a measuring stick game, and you hated the sound of that. But I think when you look at this, how tight these standings are, and a team like the Detroit Red Wings with a lot of former Senators on it, if you're the Sens, you want to show the rest of the world in the trio of Buffalo, Detroit, and Ottawa. They're always tied together in a little triangle, that you're the top dog. You're the top of that triangle, and Detroit and Buffalo are the bottom, and they are aiming for you at the top. That's what I want to see tonight. And I know you don't hate the Red Wings as much as I do, but that hatred for Detroit and for the Red Wings is still strong for me. So I want to see the Ottawa Senators get a win tonight.
And we have a look at the standings ahead, including a Wild. We know that Ottawa has played a lot of Western Conference teams, but when you think about the Atlantic Division, well, I'll just save it for the other side. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you're paying for twice? I know that's happened to me. It's probably happened to Ross. I've had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for. That's the worst. But Rocket Money makes it easy to track them down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. I love the feature of the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and it's already helped me save a ton. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. One more time, guys, rocketmoney.com/lockedon.
All right, Pillsy. So it is a game day, a 7 o'clock puck drop in Detroit. We have the postcast after the game. We also had the Locked On Red Wings boys on the show. So for a deeper dive into what's going on in Motown, check out yesterday's episode of Locked On Senators. Yesterday night, an awful night in the National Hockey League. The Montreal Canadiens get an overtime win against the Vancouver Canucks to make it into a wild card spot. Not by points percentage, but by regular points. The counting stats, can't deny it. You open the schedule, you open the standings, and there it is, Montreal in the second wild card spot. Ottawa's fourth because the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have played 3 more games than Ottawa, sit 1 point ahead. They're tied with the Canadiens. They are also in action tonight. But before we get to the standings, and we'll pull things up here on YouTube, Pillsy, when do you think the last Senators divisional game was?
Oh, no way it was the Leafs.
No, it was the Detroit Red Wings. The last time these two teams played. That's the last time the Sens have played a game in the division.
And Ross, I'm spin zoning this, and I saw some people try to help you out when on Twitter you tweeted out your concern that it's good to get these out of the way now. And I know going up against Western teams is tough because there's a lot of great teams in that conference, but it's nice that we can now look ahead. And I know you keyed in on there's only 2 more road games up against Western teams, Chicago and Nashville. So at least not long travels either. Although Chicago, I still have PTSD from being there and the way the Sens seem to play when they're there. But the fact that now they have for the rest of the season much more majority of their games closer to home and up against Eastern teams where you can really make some ground leapfrogging teams. But on the flip side, you can lose a lot of ground with these games. Hopefully that really pumps up the Sens and it gives them it narrows their sights on what their goal is for the rest of the season because it was so nice, Ross. I know it was the Christmas break, but having the Sens in that wild card spot for so long, every morning waking up and seeing them in that spot in the standings just brought a smile to my face. And now I am enraged looking at it, unless I've had to cope, Ross, and switch it to points percentage. Yeah. That helps a little. It helps. But deep down, I know that that's not real. So I need the Sens to get back into that cozy second wild card spot.
Yes, and you were right from the standpoint their second last game against the division was against the Maple Leafs. So out of their last 23 games, they've played once against the division. Once in 23 games. They've only played 38 games so far this season.
Crazy.
And I'll give you another little spin zone here, Pillsy. Senators have done great against the division. They're 1-0 against the Boston Bruins. They're 1-0 against the Florida Panthers. They're 1-0 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're 1-0 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Their only losses have come against the Buffalo Sabres and the Montreal Canadiens. Those are their only divisional losses.
Classic Sens, Ross. The teams you're like, oh man, they're so much ahead of us and it's going to be tough to beat them. The Sens beat them. And then teams where you're like, okay, we've got to beat down on these guys. Maybe you even put your money where your mouth is and you put a big bet on the Sens to beat teams like that. they just collapse and can't win. So we need that to flip around this week, Ross, because Detroit, Buffalo, and Pittsburgh, in my mind, those are winnable games. There's there's a couple reasons. Massive amounts of injuries to the team. But really, when you're looking at those teams on the schedule, you should be like, that's a nice 3-game win streak we can use to get a boost here.
Yeah, and they also beat the Detroit Red Wings. So the Sens are 5-2-0 against the Atlantic Division, and their losses came against the two teams who are at the bottom of the division. I guess not anymore with Montreal, but in terms of when they played them, that was the case. I guess it was so early in the year with Montreal, but you know what I'm saying here on the show. So with that, look, the teams ahead of Ottawa are losing, which makes it a little bit nicer where it's like, just win. It's all on Ottawa. And that's where we're in control of our own destiny on January 7th. And that hasn't been the case in a long time. So that's how I'm kind of coping with it, to use your term, where it's like, if this team's going to be a playoff team, they have to prove it. And they're in a position where if they win their games, they're in.
And Ross, it seems crazy to say, and again, this is something that you had kind of been on more that I'd been tiptoeing around, but I'm going to join you just to try to get some positivity here. I know Sens fans were preaching that they need positive Pilsy back, and our friend Brandon that joined the postcast, he also gave some positivity, so I'm going to keep that going. It's not that crazy to be like, okay, obviously you start with wanting the wild card, but the Bruins are only 5 points ahead of the Sens, and we got 4 games in hand on the Bruins. Like, if you can not, like, that wild card race is going to be tight. Some of those Metro teams are really in there, and then obviously the Atlantic teams, your Montreals and Tampas, they're obviously tight in that race too. But if you can sneak yourself into the top 3 of the division, you're looking at a much better opportunity.
You play Toronto.
Well, yeah, not even who you play, but that also is great. But then at least you're not worried about Metro teams bouncing you, right? Like, if you can get in that 3rd spot, and guys, I'm not getting too crazy. I'm not even thinking about spots 1 and 2. That's not on my mind at all. But really, 4 games in hand, only 5 points back, and the Tampa Bay Lightning have really been slipping lately. It's not that crazy that if you get down on a hot streak, you can find yourself at the very least in the mix for that number 3 spot in the Atlantic.
Tampa Bay Lightning have lost 4 games in a row. They just did the Valley of Death, which they're trying to rebrand it in California after a few down years for San Jose and Anaheim, namely. But they just got swept through California, and then they have to come home. So it's not Ottawa with just a brutal schedule. Tampa just went from the West Coast, had 1 day off at home, and now they're playing Carolina tonight on home ice. So if Carolina can smack them around, Pittsburgh's got Edmonton tonight. That's always fun, just with the McDavid versus Crosby angle. I feel like those guys bring the best out of each other. But those are 2 tough opponents for Tampa and Pittsburgh tonight. Montreal's off until Friday. So Ottawa's going to make up these games in hand by Friday. So more importance on tonight's game is getting points to move up in the standings. Like, don't look now, even Buffalo's starting to win a few games. The playoffs versus dead last is separated by 6 points. That's crazy. How tight things are in the Eastern Conference right now. Montreal's 8-2 in their last 10 games. They've caught lightning in a bottle here. Ottawa, though, they're still tied for the second best record in the last 10 games among all wildcard teams right now. Like, that's how close things are in the Eastern Conference. Now, Pittsburgh has more points because they got 3 loser points in there as well, but golly, this is going to be quite the game tonight. Because, like you mentioned, the teams like Montreal and Tampa, if Detroit wins tonight, they're tied with Ottawa as well. Albeit, again, Ottawa's 1 game in hand. But that's how much things can change in a minute in the Eastern Conference with what's going on. So a huge game tonight. There's no way around it. It is an enormous game for the Ottawa Senators tonight against a divisional opponent on the road, against a team with a below 500 record on home ice. The Wings are 9-10-2 on home ice this year. So take that win streak and make sure it doesn't get to where yours got at 6 games. Hold them to 4, and then we'll be in a very different outlook tomorrow when we break things down ahead of a game against Buffalo on Thursday.
Yeah, like we can't emphasize it enough, Ross, how big this game is. And I'm nervous and excited. Like it's and it's so lame to say, and we talked about it with the Locked On Red Wings boys, how heated this rivalry is, and it's meant literally nothing. Like none of these playoffs were on the line, none of them were in the playoffs, none of them were going to the playoffs, beating each other. Like just means nothing, but it just feels like such a big deal tonight. And oh, I want a vibe cast so bad, Ross. Let's have a vibe cast tonight. Just win.
Just make sure you got your notifications on. We will be going live right after the game. And oh boy, do I ever want to hear some danger flutes to get me in the mood. Pillsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
No final thoughts for me, Ross.
Yes,
Everything. Oh,
check the chat.
Oh boy. Okay. I got a final thought coming from Locked On Senators stats department. I didn't want to talk about this, but fine. I was going to say no final thoughts. I'm zeroed in on this game tonight, but it's sad that the New York Rangers got to claim Arthur Kaliev. Now, is Arthur Kaliev a type of player? He's a savior. He's going to turn your season around? No, but it would have been fun to get a new boost of young talent in the bottom six, like we mentioned. Apart from Josh Norris and Adam Gaudet's kind of turning back into a pumpkin here, there's not a lot of offensive capability in that bottom six. It would have been fun to get that boost, but the New York Rangers need something, so they can have them, I guess.
Yeah, it is too bad. Now, the Ottawa Senators, it made me start thinking, like, Ottawa hasn't added a player under Steve Staios' eye mid-season, except for Boris Kachuk off waivers at the trade deadline last year. So I don't know if he's waiting for the right spark. Obviously, teams know how desperate Ottawa is to make the playoffs this year. So it is just a matter of chicken of who's going to flinch first. These abhorrent prices that I'm sure teams are putting on players who Ottawa is inquiring about versus what Ottawa can do to stay afloat while Linus Ullmark is still back home and hasn't even skated yet since injuring his back more than 2 weeks ago.
Ross, could we get a word of the day on abhorrent? That's a new one for me. You always surprise me with some of your vocabulary here. I want to hear this one.
I used the word nefarious earlier in the show. I don't know if that made sense there. This one does. Abhorrent is inspiring disgust and loathing. It's repugnant.
Okay. No, I like that. Nailed it. Nice job, buddy.
Word of the day. Inspiring disgust and loathing. Use it in a sentence. Racial discrimination was abhorrent to all of us. That's according to dictionary.com, the Oxford Dictionary. Of course.
Love it.
You use any other dictionaries other than Oxford?
Not me.
No, it couldn't be us.
Yeah, it couldn't be me.
We'll see you guys after the game tonight on the postcast. It is brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub. Make sure you get those tickets for the GLEBE Central Pub shuttle for the Senators' upcoming home game against the Buffalo Sabres. For today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.